Thank you for joining me on a new and second episode of Flash Knockdown, the show that engages with people of the combat sports world. And today we are doing just that. I'm pleased to welcome as my guest and representing MMA, we have Ben Creepy Crawley. How are you, Ben?
Good, how are you?
I'm very, very well. I mean, it's always great to meet someone who has a nickname that needs no further explanation. So, Ben, before we begin, could you just tell us a little bit about your MMA career, the gym that you represent, and how people can find you and your work, please?
Yeah, of course. So, based out of Aspire Combat Sports Academy in Liverpool. So, if you're looking to come and try out a session, obviously once lockdown's over, it's just across from the Rocket Pub in Liverpool as soon as you come off the M62. For me and my MMA career, so I balance between a beginner's MMA coach, personal training, and then obviously fighting myself. Fighting's like me top priority. That's my main career, and then the personal training and the coaching side is what kind of brings in the money to pay the bills at the minute. For myself, it's more seeing of the journey that other people have been on, that I'm able to help them along the same path and hopefully guide them in the right direction to give them the same opportunities that I had when I first came into the sport. Ways can find me, so Ben Crawley MMA on Instagram. That's like my personal one, where I post mainly all of my training that I do.
Gotcha.
BC Performance, so it's BC Performance _ on Instagram as well. That's like my personal training coaching profile. And then you can search Ben Crawley on LinkedIn. So there'll be plenty coming on there in the coming months as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing that information, Ben. So before we get stuck in, I'd like to move on to the segment of the show that I've called Flash Choices. So this is where I ask you 10 questions with 2 possible answers, and you choose the one that best suits you in a flash. Got it?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So without any further ado, the first one then, Ben. Darren Till or Paddy Pimblett?
Darren Till.
Darren Till. Oh, not Paddy the Baddy. Knee bar or arm triangle choke?
Knee bar.
LFC? LFC or UFC?
LFC.
Joshua or Fury?
Fury.
Elbow to chin or shin to chin?
Shin to chin.
Kettlebells or dumbbells?
Kettlebells.
Sagat or Dalsim?
Sagat.
Kickboxer or blood sport?
Oh, you got me here. Kickboxer, just for the dance.
Yes, that dance in the bar.
Yeah, with his drunk and he ends up just fighting.
Exactly. Love that. Love that. Nate Diaz or Nick Diaz?
Nick Diaz.
Okay. And the final one, workouts 7 a.m. or 7 p.m.?
7 a.m. Get up, get it done. Wake up before your opponent, always.
There you go. There you go. That's why you're the champ. So any day that you want to change your mind on, Ben?
No, I think I'm pretty confident in my answers, to be honest. You know, you've got to, it's what comes out first, isn't it? Like that, the rules of the game.
Absolutely. That's why it's called Flash Choices. So, that was a lot of fun. So let's go back perhaps to day one then, Ben. Could you maybe share what was your first recollection of martial arts?
So for me, going way back to when I was a kid, obviously like Liverpool, big sporting city, and it's you're either playing football or you're fighting. So when I was probably 5 years old, I think, my granddad took me to karate, which was over in the sports centre across from where I lived. I probably done about 3 sessions, but it was an introduction, and it was like the basis of what you learn for the rest of your life. So they teach you how to punch correctly, you know, stuff that like you don't really pick up naturally as a kid. From there, it was football right the way through pretty much until I was 16. And my little brothers and sisters had started to go to a boxing club just up the road from my house. And I just saw them and they were enjoying it. And I thought, you know what, I'd really like to try that. Like I'd always like followed boxing and I just really wanted to give it a go. And obviously going in at this point, you know, 6'3", it's like you've got a target on your back straight away. So when I went in there, the owner came up to me straight away and he was like, have you done any like sports before? And I'm like, oh yeah, I play basketball, play football and stuff like that. And he was like, you've got good reach, you'll make a good boxer. So in that first session, considering I'd never like learned about stance and guard or anything beforehand, I got put in to spar. And I remember it was the ABA champion from the previous year, but he was 56 kilograms, so he was only little. And obviously me going in with like, I'm big, I should be okay. You sure you want to put him against me? And I got lit up for 3 rounds of sparring.
It doesn't work like that, does it?
No, exactly. So it came out with 2 black eyes, bloody nose, but I enjoyed it. Like afterwards, I came out and I wasn't like disheartened. I was like, do you know what? I want to learn from these people because they obviously have something to teach me. So on and off for the next 2 years, I was boxing. I never competed at amateur at that time. I was more just training for like, because I enjoyed it more than anything. I think that's the main part. Where after 2 years, the gym started to lose funding, so I wasn't opening as much. And for me, it was like, if I'm going into something, I have to go all in. So at the same time, I was doing like my personal training course. So it was like bodybuilding, it was powerlifting as well. And I knew the boxing gym should have been open 3 days a week for the sessions. And I really wanted to go for those sessions. It was closed one day and I turned around and I said, do you know what? I've been watching these like MMA highlight videos on YouTube. So I want to give MMA a go. But I knew when I had to go into it, I had to go in with, obviously I'd done boxing before. I had to learn my jiu-jitsu, which was primary, and I had to learn how to kick as well. But the main thing, funnily enough, that brought me into MMA was, I think it was around Christmas 2015, it must have been, or 2014 it would have been. And I was watching boxing highlights on YouTube, and as they come up, obviously in the algorithms down the side, it was like a highlight video of Nick Diaz, and it was like the Diaz brothers 209, and I just saw how like badass they looked, and they had the boxing pedigree, and they've took it into MMA, and I looked and I thought, you know what, like I'd love to give that a go. And I saw obviously they were good jiu-jitsu as well. So that was mainly my first introduction from the highlight videos. After that, I went to my first MMA gym, where I trained for 6 months, and it was primarily just doing gi and then Thai boxing. So it was like the 2 split. Then from where I lived, I heard that there was an MMA gym open around the corner. And it's one of them of where MMA gyms are really, really difficult because it's either a Mech dojo or it's like a high level gym. So I had like me worries at first. I went there on day 1 that it opened, and I've never looked back, been inspired ever since.
Who are some of your early influences growing up in martial arts?
So again, for me, it was kind of, when I was young, it was obviously like you see the likes of like Mike Tyson on telly and stuff like that, and you watch highlight videos, and then looking back probably around like when I was a kid and you watch the early UFC highlight videos. But at the time, funnily enough, I remember looking back and thinking, I'd never like to do this. I don't see why someone would enjoy this.
It was brutal, wasn't it?
Yeah, when you look at, it was even like the Chuck Liddell highlights, and I remember in my school as well, it was always like, Chuck Liddell and, Alistair Overeem, Rampage Jackson and stuff like that. So in school...
The big boys.
Exactly, yeah, because it was like a lot about the heavyweights around that time before the lower weight classes came in.
It was.
So for me, it was like in school, I remember it was, you'd have people going to Muay Thai and they'd come round and they'd like kick you in the leg and you'd be like, fucking hell, I want to learn how to do that. And then I never did at the time. I think I'd done a few Thai sessions in like an after school club. But yeah, in terms of my heroes, it was more looking at successful people over of what they're successful in, because I believe that if you're successful in anything, it can translate over. The same rules apply, the same rules of the universe apply to everyone. So it might be, there's no point me comparing myself and saying like, oh, okay, he's me influence in fighting and I want to try and be like him, because it might be he's got, you know, flexible legs and he's been doing Taekwondo since he was 4. Whereas for me, it's like, I'll probably never be able to achieve that level of flexibility, or I'll never be able to get to like a black belt in Taekwondo because I don't train it. So it was applying myself to myself and taking little bits from everywhere and then putting them back into myself. So I think looking back at when I first started MMA, it was Bruce Lee. I read the book, The Warrior Within.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of mentions of like, you know, martial arts in there, but obviously like the traditional stuff, the Jeet Kune Do. And it was seeing how he applied his like philosophical principles to the martial arts. And for me, I'm like quite a big reader into philosophy as well. So when I saw him putting 2 and 2 together, it kind of like resonated with me really quickly. So I had to make sure I learned, you know, all of the principles more than the techniques and the skills. So it's like, as he says, like apply what is useful, discard what is not. So that's what I did a lot. And then obviously it's like you see people like Mike Tyson of like the controlled aggression. I'd take a little bit of that. You know, Nick Diaz of just like, you know, being badass and not like, not fearing the opponent. And then obviously with the rise of like when I started, it was Conor McGregor right the way through. So it was always following like his career as well. And even though I don't agree with him all the time, I think it's, you know, what he's achieved for the sport and how he's done it with his mindset over anything and that law of attraction. That's
I agree.
Like what resonated with me really well.
I agree. He's definitely changed the sport of MMA without a doubt. And you mentioned there Bruce Lee and Mike Tyson. I wonder how many people Bruce Lee and Mike Tyson have influenced over the years.
100%. And like you see like the likes of Conor McGregor now, and it's going to be the next generation is going to be like, if they weren't around for his fights, they're going to be, oh, he knocked someone out in 13 seconds, you know, we've done this, we've done that.
Absolutely.
You're going to see that, and it's going to leave that legacy.
I mean, he's already left his legacy now. I mean, I watch a lot of MMA, high level MMA, and now you're seeing people, you know, in the cage, you know, after they win, demanding more money. Damon, 60 G's, baby. No one used to do that before, and also turning up to press conferences in suits.
These custom-made suits aren't cheap.
No MMA fighter used to turn up to a press conference in a suit. You know, just a couple of very basic examples as to how Conor has already left his legacy.
100%, and especially for myself, who does like a lot of further reading, you can see in similar books that like he obviously would have read, and he's been quoted as reading, and it's like, for example, wearing the suits to press conferences, that's like Napoleon Hill. He was obviously, he mentioned that he'd always wear a really expensive suit to the press conferences, or like to when he was doing what was it, like he was advertising his books, or he was going to meetings, because it's knowing your worth, it's knowing what you're worth. If you present yourself in that light, even if it's you've got £1,000 and you pay £900 for the suit, then that's your worth. That's what, you know, you've got to present yourself in that manner. So seeing the way that Conor McGregor's took bits out of like each of the books as well, really interesting.
So how would you say martial arts has positively impacted your life so far, Ben?
Mindset over anything else. I think it's okay to have the physical side of it, of being fit, of being you know, the good cardio, the discipline and stuff like that, but it all comes with teaching mindset over anything else. I believe that for anyone, if you walk into the gym on day one and you do one class If you just do a single class,
Yeah.
there you go. That's your mindset. You've just done something that's courage to walk into a new gym, and already you've learned a skill without even stepping on the mat. Over anything, it's the mindset that it's brought me, and it gives you that thirst for more. So for myself, it's always me against my own mind when I'm training. So I'll always catch myself thinking, and it's almost like there's two minds working at once. And that's what I like is the ability to push myself. And when you're kind of having that battle in your own mind and you win and you push yourself, whether it's, you're on a 10-mile run and 8 miles in, you're starting to hurt, and then you push that extra 2 miles so you can complete it.
Mm-hmm.
And like David Goggins talking about it, of the cookie jar, of where it's all of the achievements that you've obviously achieved in the past, and you put them all into this cookie jar, and you can't see what's inside it. So when you're out or you're in difficult times, no matter how they relate, so it might be like, okay, I'm struggling on a 10-mile run today. So you dip in and you pull out, okay, I've run a marathon before, so I know that I've still got this in me. Just understanding those physical limits. And then especially with what martial arts has introduced me to in terms of reading through the mindset. So obviously you see like Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson will quote Customato. Okay, where did Customato get this knowledge from? I want to know. I want it from the source. So it's like I bought a book from it was like £50, Psychology of the Fighting Man, and it's got like loads of articles in there of studies that were done about psychological trends of fighters in different combat sports, and that leads you onto the philosophy. Okay, like Conor McGregor is cool, calm, and collected when he's in the cage and he's performing. He quotes a lot of Stoic philosophy, so you start looking into Stoic philosophy, and then it's like Aristotle, Solitaire, Seneca, and all of these things, and they all link together. But it's understanding about having, when you've got those principles, of how to apply them to other areas of your life.
Is it ideal? It's not, but we get on with it. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. That's something I say to myself daily.
So the way I just mentioned then, it's like the stuff I learn in martial arts, it'll help me in running, it'll help me in business, it'll help me in all of these different things. And now for me, it's paying it back. It's trying to teach people that it's the mindset side of it. So that's what I try to imply in my personal training, is it's all about the mindset. It's little things like telling people that a session's finished and then getting them back in to do 5 more minutes. It's just the little things that I think add up over time.
Have you adopted, or has martial arts helped you to adopt a stoic mindset?
100%. I think it's seeing how far I can push myself at the minute, to be honest, in terms of, so obviously, like as I mentioned before, you go into the gym for the first time, it's nerve-wracking. And then I feel like for me, especially in Aspire where I train, and it's a mat full of killers, it's nerve-wracking every time you're going in there. And like a lot of people won't admit that, but you go in and you don't know how a session's going to plan out. It's always about staying sharp on the mindset front. So for me this year, it was like, I really enjoyed running. But road running, it kind of does get boring, and it's how do you push yourself with road running? It's you increase the distance, you increase the speed. They're the two variables, okay? So for me, then I decided, okay, I want to start fell running. So this year I've started running up mountains now, and pretty much I started in January, so it was middle of winter, and I've run up mountains when there's been storms on. And for me, it's always about pushing through, of understanding it. You've got to be completely alert in where you are in that time, because if it's, blistering down with snow, high winds, you take one slip in the wrong direction. If you're not fully alert with your body, it's going to be injury or death. And it's that kind of stuff that excites me, because that's the battle of your own mind. The chances of it happening are really slim, but your body's telling your mind, hang on a minute, you're in pain, you're not alert and stuff like that. It's freezing cold. So just being able to flip that switch. So it's for me, I'm always pushing, I'm finding that next goal of how far I can push myself.
Well, that moves us on very nicely to the next segment, and that's looking at your MMA career. So what made you want to compete in the first place?
So for me, I think it was an obvious transition of as I said, when I'm doing something, I'm all in. So it's kind of like, you know, you don't play football on the field when you're a kid without the thoughts of playing a game, even if that's just like a game against your parents, game against your family, or, you know, whatever. So for me, when I started training, I wasn't going to put the hours on the mat that I was putting in without at least getting an end goal out of it, of testing myself. Because I remember when Aspire first opened and they'd have the 3 classes on a night, so it'd be 6 until 9. Me and my little brother, because we obviously only lived around the corner, we'd go in at 5 o'clock, we'd do like an hour of jiu-jitsu, like just me and him rolling. It'd be 6 till 9 doing the classes, and then we'd probably stay until about 10 o'clock doing things, even if it wasn't directly MMA related. It'd be things like practicing handstands on the mat, doing extra push-ups, sit-ups, whatever it was, and we were just enjoying the sport, you know. And I think that's the main thing over anything, is just enjoying the sport.
Yeah, no, it's really important to enjoy what you do, and it definitely shows in your fights. So your first fight was in 2016 against Mark France, if I'm not mistaken. What did you learn about yourself following that process?
So for me, it was. So I think we're going to go back to like a few months beforehand. So I'd started in my first combat experience was white collar boxing. So I did, yeah. So like full unlicensed boxing, and obviously I think that set me in good stead, because it's who I was going in against was these like big muscly, like, you know, juiced fellas. And for me at the time, I was like 19, I think. So I was like a scrawny, I wasn't scrawny, but compared to them, I was a scrawny little kid. And when I was winning those fights, and it kind of put me in, okay, you know, I know I can achieve now. I know I can, you know, beat men when I need to. And then I think that grew me into like a man myself almost as I was coming into it. So I'd been training pretty much as if I was in a fight camp non-stop. Like I always believe that you shouldn't ever train for a fight. You should always train to better yourself all the time, whether you've got a fight coming up or not. Like you'll see a lot of people now in lockdown, oh, I'm not training, I haven't got a fight. I'll start training come July when the gym's open, if they do. I'll start training for a fight and then I'll fight in September. That's not right, because there's someone, whether it's here or in a foreign country, who's training non-stop. They're training because, you know, they need to put food on the table. They need to make the families proud, whatever it is. Someone's always training. So I trained right the way through, leading up to that fight. And in my mind, I knew that I was like ahead of what a debut fighter should be. Like I knew I was confident in my skills, confident in my hands, my jiu-jitsu, everything going into that fight. And the best part about it was that I lost. Like, and you know, you won't really hear people say that. But for one, I think at amateur, it's all about learning no matter what. So that's why it's, if you look at my record, it's not bad, it's 4-3. But you look at the guys who have fought, I've only fought, you know, difficult fights at the time. When I lost that fight, and I honestly thought I'd won, I kind of realized that, you know, this is the sport, and that's the reason why I enjoy it, is because I was, you know, probably 2 rounds up for argument's sake, but in the last round, you know, I got caught with the teep. I got like wounded, and I remember in that moment, it was kind of like, it was as soon as the first teep hit and I felt it, and then the second one hit, and I remember thinking, like, I'm kind of not invincible here. So if you look at me right the way through, I do have like that stoic look on my face of no emotion. I wasn't overly aggressive. I wasn't, you know, but at the same time, that's counterintuitive, because there was times when I could have finished that fight.
Yeah.
And he told me after it, he came up to me and he said, there was times where you could have finished me there. And that's like the biggest hit in the gut that hurt more than the teep, because you kind of realize, you know, it's a wasted opportunity. But I'm so thankful for the experience because of what I learned after it. I got myself a sports psychologist to think, why aren't I clicking in these certain situations? Is it, you know, what do I have to do to kind of reassure myself?
Did you feel you were missing that or lacking that killer instinct?
Yeah, so I think I had it within my technique, but I think it was more just that. It was just technique. Like when I was going through the motions, if you look, like the first thing that comes out with is, jab low, then jab high. And that was what I was always going for, chop the tree at the trunk and then it'll fall over from the top.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my game plan going into it. And then when I started to let my hands go, I started to enjoy it more, and I saw them getting cut and I saw them getting bloodied. And yeah, for me, it was kind of like finding of when I should. So what we did was we went back and we watched the fight and we saw every time of where I could have finished the fight. So we looked back and it was like after the boxing combination against the fence, and he's walked away and you can see him wobbling. And I stand there and I'm just like staring him down, whereas I should have gone in.
Yeah,
I don't think it was.
Yeah, that was your opportunity to capitalize.
100%. I don't think it was a case of me lacking killer instinct, because I think you need that to go in there anyway, because it's either you or them. But I think it was in terms of me fight IQ, of understanding that he was hurt, more reading the emotion on the other fighter. But the positive thing that came from it was, and that came from that loss, if I would have won that fight, I don't think I would have picked up on that. And I don't think it would have gone on the 3-fight win streak to follow.
Your last victory, you won by arm triangle choke.
Yeah.
I think you won that within the first 80 or so seconds of the first round. So how much do you really learn from such a short fight?
See, like for me, I think it's difficult, to be honest. I think it's all about cage time. Like I was speaking to someone recently,
right?
And you see a lot of people who will have like these big records. So, they might be like, I don't know, 6-2 at amateur. And then you look at the cage time that they've had in fights, and you kind of add up and it's like they've had, less than 20 minutes. If you think of in any other professional sport, so amateur boxing, for example, if you're an amateur, how many fights have you had? How many 3-minute rounds have you had before you turn professional? There's people out there having 50, 100 fights. And I think it's that combat experience is what is the most important part. So in a fight like that, for me, it's frustrating, because it's so leading up, I was supposed to have a different opponent. I was supposed to have this tough, like, French opponent who he was knocking people out. He was strong. He was athletic. And I was excited to test myself against that. As I say, it's like win or lose. I was going to get a good fight. Fight week, he pulled out for whatever reason. And I got the fighter that I got who'd done bare knuckle boxing. He's had like quite a few MMA fights and stuff like that as well. So he's experienced. He's had that combat experience. But, for me, if anything, I look at my performance in that fight, and even from a win, there's a lot I could take from it. So
okay, that's good.
In terms of, rocked him with the head kick. And for me, I just I switched on with my killer instinct, as you say, of where I went to finish the fight. But then my range and my distance perception switched off. So I ended up coming of where my range is this far, he ended up this close, and all of a sudden he's hugging me. And he's, big, strong lad. So when he gets hold of you in a situation like that, there was no doubt for me that I was going to get the win on that night. But it's the small wins, it's the small battles. For me, I feel like I could have put on a better performance in that fight.
Yeah, and then the fight went to the grounds, and then you just imploded with some hammer fist. Looking at your other fights, one thing that was a recurring theme is your ground and pound game, which is just nasty. Is that something that you focus on a lot in training?
Do you know what? Not necessarily. I know I've always got it in the bag, but you can't hit your training partners that hard. It's one of them. It's a thing that you always know that you've got.
Right.
You're always able to use it. And for me in training, it's more about opening the positions. So my grounding pound, it may look brutal, but it's the art leading up to it. It's the principle of the positions of where I'm putting them in. So it's I can swing big and close guard, like I can just rain down hammer fists, but if they're covering, they're never going to land. So it might look good, but it's not practical. It's wasted energy. It's not efficient. Whereas if you look at the way that I'm tying them up and trapping arms and looking for openings, I'm using leverage in the correct way, you know, head above your bum and stuff like that. Just basic human biomechanics. It's when all of that links together, that's the end product that you will see. So yeah, for me, it's not something that I directly train in training of being able to, like, you know, rain down big hammer fists with power. It's about putting my partners in the positions of where I know that, you know, they wouldn't be able to defend the shots that are coming in a fight.
Right, makes sense. That makes complete sense. So looking at that fight with Johnny Broxlesby, and then the knee bar that you managed to pull off, you were being dominated for 3 straight rounds.
Yeah, I was kind of playing possum a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, and then coming out in the 4th round, you managed to get that knee bar. But before we look at that in particular, I just want to know how were you able to keep your composure, first of all, and was you always confident that the victory would come?
Yeah, for me,
Okay.
it was my opportunity. So the week before that fight, I was supposed to fight on Cage Warriors Academy, which was going to be a #1 contender fight against a guy with a similar style to Johnny, Welsh lad. So I'd been training for this fight, and I'd been training non-stop. So, like, as I said, it was leading up from February when I got my first win, and then I went on like this win streak. I'd been training non-stop, so I knew my fitness was there. It was probably the highest, the fittest I'd been at welterweight. We knew looking at him. So obviously, like, after I found out that the fight the week before was off, and my coach said, you know, we've got this opportunity for you.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little look at him, and we knew he was short and stocky for a welterweight. So we knew that he wasn't naturally a welterweight. And, you know, as a professional, he's gone down to lightweight. He's fighting it now. So you can obviously see that he wasn't meant to be. So we knew he was going to tire. And the main game plan going into it was keep moving, keep him moving.
Right.
If we're letting him stay in resting positions, then, you know, he's able to recover.
Right.
So as long as, if I'm on my back and he's throwing punches, okay, threaten the triangles, threaten the arm bars, you know, I might not get them. The thing is as well, it's by having the arm bar, it's tying an arm up of where he's not able to hit you. I really wanted to keep the fight on the feet. That was like my main goal, keeping him moving, because I knew that if he had hold of me, he was strong. But I knew that it was just a matter of time. I had 5 rounds to play with there. The first 2, I was always going to play possum. I was going to, you know, keep him moving and get him tired. In the 3rd was originally when I was going to switch it on, but I got taken down at the start of the 3rd round. And then that was when, in my head, it was about, as I say, keeping composure, of understanding this hasn't gone my way, but I still got, you know, 2 rounds to make it up here. But I'm going to have to get a finish because these 3 rounds to the good here. And, you know, the judges could score them as 10-8s. So I knew I had to get that finish. But, you know, there was never any doubt in my mind that it was coming one way or another.
I think that tactic that you deployed about, you know, playing possum for the first 2 rounds and getting him tired. You saw him at the end of the 3rd round. I mean, he was breathing heavily, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's a key theme in most of my opponents, to be honest. Like, I like to try and set that pace, and it's for me, it's always, I'm going to run. Are you going to keep up with me? Or if you are keeping up with me, how long can you? So that's the tactics that I try to, you know, implement into my fights. But yeah, he was.
He was breathing. Yeah.
Well, Phil, my coach, turned around to me and he said, "Turn around and look at him. He's like throwing up in his corner, struggling to stand."
Wow.
Yeah, not even breathing hard.
Yeah, he wasn't. Wow. So you used that as extra motivation.
100%. I remember though, after the 3rd, so I think he said that to me after the 2nd, he was like, you know, you need to go and finish this. After the 3rd, I remember Alan Philpott, my coach, he told me, he was like, you've got to go and get this now. This is your round. You've got to get the finish. So funnily enough, my thought process for when I threw the wheel kick, I always remember this. Phil, my coach, had told me to kick him to the body get that left kick chopping into the liver. He didn't think it was going to be, many kicks. But then obviously in my mind, it was kind of like two brains were fighting. So I was thinking, he's a wrestler. If he catches the kick, I'm going down. I'm on my back.
Again.
Yeah, pretty much.
Again.
So the week before, we had a lad fighting on Cage Warriors Academy. And he dropped his opponent, Luke Crossland it was. He dropped his opponent with a spinning push kick to the stomach. And I remember thinking, okay, I feel like I could drop him with this. Just as the bell rang and we were going out and we said there's no touch of gloves, I knew this was my opportunity. I was going to spin and I was going to throw a kick. For whatever reason in my head, I said, wheel kicks knock people out, don't they? So I threw this wheel kick as he stormed forward, because he was, I feel like looking back now, he was always going to grab me. He was always going to grab hold of me and he was just going to, breathe on me for the entire round. So when I spun and I threw that wheel kick and I just saw the floor coming towards me and I was like, I'm going to have to roll here. So I remember just tucking my head and rolling. And I think after that, it was all, me body took over me muscle memory.
Ben Crawley, no. Oh! Alan Philpott just said to Ben Crawley,
the knee bar,
put it on him.
It's deep.
How's he ended up in that position? He's got it! Unbelievable!
Oh my word, that came from nowhere!
I can't even believe what I've just seen!
Like, I don't think I was conscious in that moment. The next time I kind of remember was Phil saying, hips in. And then, me running off after snapping his hamstring. So,
Faraz Sahabi constantly talks about being in a state of flow. So I'm guessing that's exactly the state that you were in.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's one of them of where I did come out of it for the second, because it was the realization after the third round of, okay, I have been flowing, I've been keeping to my game plan. But then I kind of like almost shocked myself out of it, of where it was like, oh, I need to go and get this finished now. Like I've got to, and then it's in your head, you're playing like a million different scenarios out in once. But because I think in my mind, I do a lot of visualization, and because I'd visualized that fight so many times, I knew about all the different scenarios that were possible. And I don't think I would have ever imagined what actually turned out to happen. But I knew I had the muscle memory in my mind of different positions and, of things that could happen. Because I was related back to this little analogy of, there was a prisoner, and when he went into prison, I think he was in for like 5 years or something, and he said, I'm going to use my time productively. So he got a book of how to play golf, and it had all of the golf techniques in there. And he said, by the time I come out, I've never played golf before, I want to be able to play golf. So he's reading through, and what he did was, as he'd read through, he visualized himself doing the techniques, close his eyes, back straight, knees bent. And after he came out, he went to one of the courses that they took like the pictures of the techniques at, and he went there and he played the perfect game on par after never playing golf before in his life. So that is the power of visualization. Like if I'm thinking now in my mind, okay, I'm thinking about throwing a jab. Yeah, my muscles aren't moving, but the signals from my brain are firing to that muscle to be able to say, okay, it's reactive here, it's ready to go. All you've got to do is, take the brakes off and you're throwing that jab. So it's being able to train when you're laying there in bed of a night and you're not thinking about anything. I always try and visualize techniques or something like that, because it's extra training. That's extra hours of mat time that people who aren't getting. So in that fight, I feel like I implemented that really well, of coming off of, obviously thinking about what had happened the week before. And then after I threw that kick, it was kind of like I just went straight back into flow, complete muscle memory.
What I'd like to also know now, Ben, if possible, is what are your goals and objectives in MMA?
So I feel like these have changed a lot since I've started. So obviously it's, you ask someone who's starting what they want. It might be the first fight. It might be
the first win. Yeah.
Yeah. So, some people it's just to get in the cage. Some people it's to win. Some people it's, UFC champion. And I'd always like to tell people that You know, I want to be UFC champion. But
Why not?
Along the journey, I've came to realize that it's not about belts. It's not about, because you can lose in a title fight, and it doesn't mean that, you know, you're the worst fighter in the world. And the people who's watching's eyes, you're the worst fighter, you know what I mean, because you haven't won that belt. But for me, it's about getting better. It's about yourself. Like, you are your only opponents. No matter who you're against in the cage, it's a reflection of yourself. Your opponent's thinking the exact same thing as you. Whether you're scared, they're probably scared of you. You're looking at them and thinking, oh, he's got big shoulders, he's going to hit me hard. I've, you know, watched his previous fights where he submitted people, he's knocked people out. Is he going to do that to me? He's thinking the exact same thing. They're probably thinking, is he going to throw a wheel kick and snatch me leg again?
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, it's now, like, obviously Aspire runs under the motto, better never stops. And that's something that I think, obviously I believe a lot in the law of attraction. I think that motto came to me in terms of, you know, it's always about me getting better, because it's kind of superficial. Like, you see, like Tyson Fury talking about it, of where he got to the belts and when he was world champion, he's happy. And I kind of took that as, okay, because I remember after I won the belt against Johnny, I stopped training, I started eating more.
Yeah.
It was, the mental side of it was like, okay, I've done it now, what do we do? You know?
He said he felt empty, didn't he?
Yeah, and that was me. It was, you know, to win an amateur belt, like it's so silly looking back on it, to win an amateur belt and thinking, okay, now the world owes me everything. And I'm grateful that I learned that lesson. Because looking back, it could have been until, you know, I was professional, like 12 fights into a professional, and then I win a belt, and then, you know, that kind of hits me from nowhere. But I'm glad that I learned it as an amateur. And I think since then, now, I've applied myself in a different way to my training, of understanding that it's not about an end goal, there's never an end. It's, you're always getting better. And as long as you're better than you was yesterday, then that's perfect. I always judge it as like, you're only as good as your last fight. So for me, as long as now in my training, I know that I could beat myself in my last fight, then that's completely fine by me. You know, it's not about, okay, I never beat my opponent in my last fight, for example. Got choked out in the first round. But I know that Ben would have beat the Ben that fought in December.
Yeah.
And for me, that's enough.
So before we move on to the final segment of the show and just staying on MMA competition, what do you make of the UK MMA scene, particularly in the northwest of England, which just seems to be a hotbed for talent? Why do you think that is, Ben?
I think, yeah, when you look at UK MMA as a whole, I'd say, yeah, the northwest. You know, I think it's just the gyms, to be honest, when you look at, because, yeah, it's okay saying it's the fighters, but they're a product of the gyms. And you look at, you know, obviously you've got like countless good gyms in Liverpool. Everyone's going to fight everyone else. And no matter who it is, everyone's going to fight each other. No one's picking fights. No one's, you know, padding the record. I mean, obviously there are still people doing it, and there are those like the little gyms that will, but everyone's going to fight everyone else. I think everyone's always looking for that best fight. And when you look at, obviously, the northwest of England, it's like Liverpool, I said, you've got football, you've got fighting, people have boxed before, people have, you know, it's that mindset that comes into it. In Manchester as well, you know, in the genetics, it's hard work, and so you see all the people there training across different gyms as well, and people just aren't afraid to travel to different gyms now. I feel like that was a big thing in the past in MMA. It's always been, you know, I will stand under my sensei and I will, you know, worship him to the death. But whereas now it's being able to, like, we've had people from like Blackburn Predators come down for sparring at Aspire. Like we've been to like the MMA academy in town to train, and it's being able to understand that, yeah, we might fight each other one day, but why not all hone our skills together? You know, it's the only way that we're gonna excel in the sport, because I still think we're always classed as second best compared to the Americans. But you put some of those American amateurs or even low-level pros against us, you know, it's a no-brainer that we're going to win. We've got the difference in the mentality. Like, I think they fight 3 2-minute rounds in shin guards. We fight 3 3s, pretty much professional rules, but without elbows, and the time limit's different. No twist and leg locks. You know, there's not much of a difference here of the transition between amateur and pro. I always say as well, it's, if you look in this country, even as an amateur, you should train like a professional. You should always, even though you're not fighting under a professional rule set, you should fight under a professional mindset. And I think that's the main point of, you know, why, you know, not just the Northwest, but UK MMA is taken off at the minute. And I think in the next 5 years as well, you're going to see a lot more world champions coming out of the UK.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the Midlands is also another hotbed for UK MMA.
100%. And then obviously you've got London down south as well, multiple gyms there, and, you know, even the jiu-jitsu gyms as well. Like, it really is starting to take off now.
Yeah, no, true. That's good, and great to see for the sport of MMA. So yeah, so now we move on to the final segment of the show. So I just want to reiterate my thanks to you, Ben, and for your time. Honestly, it's been absolutely riveting for me. So this last segment of the show is called Flash 5. So I ask you 5 questions, and you just give me your best answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So number 1. Who would you have loved to have competed against, dead or alive?
So I've probably got like 2 answers here.
All right, go on.
I'd say Mike Tyson in boxing. That's going to be a lot of like people, you know, Mike Tyson in his prime as well, because it's, for me, it's always, you know, how good are you going to do against the best? And, you know, I might get knocked out in the first round.
You probably will.
Yeah, you can see that you were in there with Tyson. You know, and I think you learn a lot about yourself from things like that. In MMA, probably John Jones. I'd like to see, you know, he's got the best fight IQ. And I'd like to see, I think I'd learn more about myself in that fight than any other, because of the way he breaks down fighters. I think it'd be really interesting to see how he'd break me down. And if anything, if he gives respect to some of my skills, I know that they are good skills, you know what I mean? If he's wanting to take me down, then at least I know my striking's good, and vice versa.
Just watch out for the eye pokes with John Jones.
And I'll go in with safety glasses on.
Jones put his finger in his eye, dirtiest fighter in MMA.
What would be your ideal way to finish an opponent, if you could choose one?
Flashy submission or shin to chin.
Oh, okay. Love it. Which specific combat sport bouts in the past, obviously, would you have loved to have been a part of?
GSP, when he fought the Rogers Centre in that environment.
That was like 55,000 people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was the record at the time.
The record at the time, yeah.
Everyone obviously there to see GSP. He was like the face of the sport at the time.
Incredible, and he came out he came out in his gi as well.
Yeah, and like, you know, when you see stuff like that, that was a big moment for the sport of putting it in a massive stadium and seeing, you know, what he could do, and he performed as well, and that's why he's the champ. So, you know, put me in there against him, and I'd love to have that experience over anything else.
That's a good answer. 2 more then. So what superpower would you choose to have?
That's a good one. Read my opponent's minds.
Love that. And then the final one, what one rule would you change in MMA?
Well, I'd tell you there'd be a few. 12-6 elbows and headbutts.
Well, if the 12-6 elbow was allowed, John Jones would have a perfect record.
I know. I think it's stupid the way that they based it off watching karate instructors break blocks with it, and he thought, you know, okay, well, we're not putting that in, because if they can do that to a concrete block, but then obviously not understanding the leverage of how that works and the, you know, the force going through. Like you'd never do that to someone's, you know, it's like Michael Venom Page just start banning knees.
Oh, against Cyborg.
Yeah, because after that, directly they banned knees in amateur MMA to the head. You're not allowed to knee to the head in amateur MMA now, which was just before I'd started, I believe. Some promotions were still doing it, but it became unified amateur rules. So, you know, things like that. And then I think headbutts as well. I think certain positions, especially in jiu-jitsu, when you go back to the Vale Tudo stuff, you look at headbutts and you think you should be able to certain positions of where, if that's in a street fight, if that's in unarmed combat completely, you should be able to use your head.
Yeah. Great. That's us then, Ben. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. How was it for you, Ben?
Good. I feel like I got a lot of what I have to say across. For me, it's the big thing. Anyone watching this, take away is it's all about your mindset. No matter what you're doing, whether you're watching this, you know, working a 9 to 5, you know, whether you're fighting yourself at whatever level, take away that it's all about your mindset. And as long as you're always trying to be better than yourself, don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Don't care about what anyone else thinks of you. Always try and be better than yourself.
Great. Good advice there, Ben. Thank you so much for that. So thank you everyone for watching another episode of Flash Knockdown, the show that engages with the people of the combat sports world. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.